Okay, so you've gotten pretty good at your calligraphy and you think you're ready to maybe start making some income from your skills. First of all, that's awesome. Good for you. But second of all, it can be a little bit overwhelming. Actually, it can be a lot overwhelming. So in this video, I'm going to walk you through 4 things that I think are the perfect spot to start if you want to start making money with your calligraphy. Hey, I'm Becca with the Happy Ever Crafter, and all of the 4 types of projects I'm going to talk about in this video are paper related. And the reason for that is that one of the biggest problems I see with people who are getting started with making money on their calligraphy is that they assume they have to do big, elaborate calligraphy jobs like signage. So with those, for example, you would actually have to learn how to transfer your calligraphy skills onto a different type of surface, which is like learning a whole nother skill. And so in this video, I'm going to talk about paper related products because once you've learned calligraphy, you practice on paper, you know how to use it. Starting with paper projects is naturally an easy place to get going with selling your work. So if you're just starting to offer your services, this is a less intimidating spot to start. And then once you're feeling more comfortable with the act of actually making money from your skills, which can be scary as heck at the beginning, you can actually start doing some more elaborate projects. This is just a place to get the ball rolling. The first thing I want to talk about is place cards. So place cards are a great place to start because they actually don't require you to learn much else in terms of layouts or doing anything fancy. It's usually just 1 or 2 names in a straight line on a small piece of paper, which is no biggie if you've been doing calligraphy for a while. My 3 insider tips for doing place cards though, the first one is always ask for about 20% extra blank place cards from the client because you're bound to screw up and you don't want to screw up when you only have a set number that you can work on. The second thing is to try and make sure that you understand what type of paper they're providing you with. If the client's giving you the place cards themselves, you want to try and get as much information as you can from them on what type of paper it is and give them realistic expectations of what you could use on it. So if they're looking for specifically pointed pen, you can't use that on all types of paper. If they're looking for brush pen, you want to try and get a smoother paper and things like that. So just trying to understand what you're working with at the beginning and setting realistic expectations. And the third thing is to always ask what format they're going to want their place cards in. So some people just want it to say Becca. Some people want it to say Becca Cordis. Some people want it to say Miss Becca Cordis. And so it's really important to get a feel for how much wording they're going to want on each place card and then charge accordingly. So I'm going to do more videos on pricing and I have a full course on pricing, but essentially if you're writing just one name, it's going to be different than if you're writing a whole long name with Mr., Mrs. and things like that on it. So those are my 3 insider tips for place cards. Long story short, for place cards, the minimum pricing you're going to be seeing is about $1 per place card. That usually covers just a first and last name on a white place card with basic black brush pen or something really simple. And then if it's more complicated, you're going to go up in price from there. So in total, let's say you were doing a wedding for 150 people, you could be expecting to make about $150 in your pocket if you did a place card job. The second job type I'm going to talk about is envelope calligraphy. And envelope calligraphy is a really common service for calligraphers to offer, and it's a little more challenging than place cards. So I actually have an envelope tutorial and I'll link to it up here so you can check it out. But I also want to explain how much more money you can make with envelope calligraphy. I think a lot of people don't realize how expensive it is to get envelope calligraphy done, and if you are a calligrapher offering that service, it can actually be pretty lucrative. That being said though, keep in mind how much time they take you because they take a lot longer than you think, and there's a reason why they're so expensive. So my insider tips for envelope jobs, the first one, same as place cards, make sure you always ask for extras, about 20% extra so that you can account for your screw ups. The second thing, again, same as place cards, make sure you try and understand what type of envelope you're working with, and sometimes the client wants you to provide the envelopes, which is great, but often they have the envelopes themselves. So maybe having a tester from them if you can, or just trying to understand what type of paper it is. The third one is ask about styles and charge accordingly. So if they just want, again, a really basic white envelope with black brush pen, 4-line address, like the name and calligraphy, the words in block letters, it's pretty simple. But if they want like a beautiful calligraphy layout and it's angled on the envelope or it's some sort of like fancy decoration, you're going to charge accordingly for that. And then the fourth thing is to make yourself a template So for every addressing job, it might be a little bit different. You can make yourself a custom template and then work off of that so that it saves you a ton of time in the end. Again, I go over things like this in my envelope tutorial, so make sure you check that one out. But long story short, with envelope jobs, you are gonna usually make at least $2.50 per envelope, which is like, I almost don't even want to tell you to charge that little, because once you start doing it, you're gonna understand how much work it is, and $2.50 still feels low to me. So usually for me, it's closer to actually $5 per envelope, even for your most basic, and it greatly depends on the specific of the job. So again, for that same wedding we were talking about earlier, for 150 people, you would actually end up with a minimum of about $375 in your pocket for an envelope job. So again, it can be quite lucrative, but just once you start doing it, try and figure out how long it takes you per envelope and make sure that you're charging accordingly. The third type of project I want to talk about is vows. So this is a really popular one for calligraphers as well. A lot of people ask for custom orders of their vows, their wedding vows, to be written out on a bigger piece of paper that they can frame and put in their home. This obviously involves a little more layout work, and so I have some tips for vows specifically. The first one is make sure the client double, triple, quadruple checks the spelling of their vows and make sure they know that you're going to use exactly the wording that they gave you. If you look on their note of what it's supposed to say in your vows and it looks like maybe there's a word missing or something, you can always ask them, but you want to make sure that they've looked over it before you start doing the layout, because it's really hard to add in or take out words once you've nailed down the layout. The second thing is to make sure you know the exact size that they want and how big they're going to want to frame it, because I've had instances where they've said they want it on 11 by 14 paper and I do the vows in the 11 by 14 space, but then the frame actually cuts part of it off. So asking those things ahead of time can be really helpful. And the third thing is to use a light box. So what you would do is you would do your rough copy of the vows, do the layout in pencil, get it all perfect in the right size, and have it perfectly laid out with triple checked spelling, everything's perfect. And then you put your good copy paper over top and you use a light box, and then you trace it through and do your good copy. That saves you a ton of time with having to erase mistakes or even just completely restart if you make a spelling mistake, which happens a lot. And if you get all the way to like the 300th word in a vow and you mess it up, you got to restart. So making sure your rough copy is perfect and then using a light box is a super helpful tip. Vows can be priced out a couple different ways, and it's totally personal preference. My personal recommendation is that you price your vows per word. So this can obviously vary depending on if the words are in really fancy colored metallic inks versus just a simple black brush pen, and you can up the price per word if it's going to be something fancy. But generally with vows, it's somewhere around $1 per word, and that's my personal preference in the type of pricing structure for vows. With this, you might also think about having a minimum price. So if someone came to you with vows that were only 20 words long, you would only make 20 bucks, which is sort of crazy when you think about the time it takes you to do the layout and put everything together and, you know, back and forth to the client. So if you had a minimum price of $50, for example, even if their vows are under 50 words, you're still going to make that $50. So that's a really good thing to have in the back of your mind with jobs like this. And lastly, the fourth item that I want to talk about is just custom quotes or custom artwork. And this could really mean anything under the sun. It could be a cute little saying somebody wants lettered. It could be song lyrics. It could be a baby's name for their nursery. Things like that are really common. But that being said, there are, again, I have a couple little guidelines that'll help you out. So the first one is to ask a lot of questions and make sure you know exactly what the client wants before you get started. You will get better with this over time and you'll know exactly what questions to ask, but the more information you have right up front, the easier it'll be not only to do the job, but to quote the job accurately. The second is to give the client a rough sketch at the beginning and make sure that they're happy with it, but then also set a limit on the number of revisions you'll do to it. So when you agree on the price, you're going to tell the client that I will do 2 sketches included in my price, and we can work back and forth to make sure you're happy with it. But then above and beyond those 2 sketches, if you want more changes, it's going to be at my hourly rate. Again, I go into a lot more detail on this in my pricing course, but for the basics, that's really what you need to know for this. So this type of work will have a huge range of pricing depending on what the job is. But just remember when you're pricing custom work like this that it's custom work, and I don't want you to undervalue what it's worth. So even if it's something really small, understanding that the time you're taking to work back and forth with the client, to come up with the outline for the project, and then to set up your tools and to use your tools and all the skill that you've acquired over time to be able to do this job is worth money. And so don't undervalue yourself, and don't fall into the trap of thinking that, oh, it's just a little hand lettered card, when really it's a custom piece of art. So keeping that in mind is helpful too. If you struggle with this stuff, again, I highly recommend checking out the Panic-Free Pricing course. We go into a lot of detail about that, and it's definitely going to be really helpful if you're a beginner with pricing and knowing your worth and all those kinds of things. So I hope this video makes you excited about the possibilities that you can have with your skills. And do me a favor and leave me a comment down below telling me which of these 4 projects you think you're most likely to try, because I'm always curious where people start. Next, if you're still feeling intimidated by accepting money for your work and actually feeling comfortable with that, check out this video where I walk you through how to know if you're ready. And actually, it's not just me walking you through it, it's lots of my artist friends. So check out this video next, and I'll see you over there.